many downsides to living out here in the middle of nowhere. It's super peaceful. It's like every time you come home, it's a vacation. You just see hills and you hear coyotes and you see deer every day, so it's fantastic. But man, one of the downsides is the bugs. We don't have people spraying their lawns out here like they do in subdivisions. And so therefore, bug pressure is crazy here, like I've never experienced it before. We seem to have a season for every single bug, and in one of those seasons that's especially difficult for everything we build out here is the season involving the dadgum carpenter bees. They are destructive on a level that I have never seen anything anywhere else like this before. They actually will just completely dismantle any kind of wooden structure. And so with that, we are going to go ahead and be putting these purlins up for the next portion of this structure, and these are always going to stay exposed. They're not going to be covered like the rest of the building is. So these need to be coated, need to be treated, and we're hoping that a deck type covering will help prevent a lot of those carpenter bees coming in and just boring holes through everything and just tearing the structure down. So hopefully that works out. That is coming out about like a Wendy's Frosty. That is brutal. That sucked. Huh? Coming out that way. Well, we have finally gotten all the trusses put up on this thing, so we can finally take that piece of scrap steel off our bucket and stop being so redneck for just a little bit longer. So the next thing we want to do is we want to see if we can actually get the rest of this portion that's actually covered dried in. So we've already got most of the roof on that portion over top of it, so that way the rain's not hitting it directly, but we've still got the sides to deal with. We want to put windows in, we want to put doors in, and we want to put siding on and finally get that portion wrapped up. And then that way the only thing we have to do is just get the roof done. So that's our next step.
Staying home.
So as you can see, we have finally gotten this building completely taped up. So now we get to move on to the next step, which now we need to put in the doors and the windows. Now, although the doors are already cut, obviously, the windows we kind of held off on. The reason why we held off on the windows is because I really wanted to get an idea of what the space on the inside was going to actually look like, and that way we could actually see what we're going to be working with. And although this building, I would like for it to be aesthetic, it really needs to be functional. So that was an important deciding factor for how this building's windows were actually going to go in, because I needed to know exactly where the natural light's going to be and where certain workbenches and things are going to be, and that way we don't have to have the lights on all the time. So now that we've gotten all of that stuff straightened out, I've got an idea of exactly where I want to put those windows in. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now that we actually have the inside framing for the doors and windows completely finished, we need to actually start working on the outside framing for the doors and windows. Now, that sounds kind of strange. Typically, there's not really a whole lot of framing that actually is done on the outside of the doors and windows, but the reason we're actually wanting to do that is that, well, this building really is kind of overbuilt for just an equipment barn is really all it is. And granted, the reason for that is that we do want to build something that lasts for a really long time, because the reality is that anytime I ever do something once, I never want to have to do it again. But the other thing is that this is kind of a test bed for a lot of the ideas that I've kind of had spinning in the back of my mind in terms of building the houses that we want to build on this property. And so one of the things that I actually want to do is I want to see if I can come up with a different way that doors and windows are mounted. Now, I'm kind of frustrated by the way that doors and windows are typically mounted, and also then the trim and the siding that's then mounted to those doors and windows. And the reason why is because typically whenever you put your trim on, the trim actually goes on first before the siding does, and then once the trim goes on, the siding then comes in and then butts right up against it just like this. Now the problem with that is that you have a seam that actually goes down between the siding and the trim, and that seam you then actually have to caulk over. Now the issue with caulk is that, well, the sun seems to break down everything, and the sun seems to break down the caulk a lot faster than it does the siding and the trim and the rest of the building altogether. And so typically once you build a building and you actually have to put caulk on the outside of the building, that becomes a maintenance point. And again, I don't like doing things twice. And so what I've been trying to come up with the idea of is how I can actually try to avoid that, or maybe even prolong the life of that caulking if I just absolutely must do it. And so the idea is that instead of actually putting your trim down first and then my siding up against it just like that and then putting caulk over top of it, I want to actually bring the doors and the windows out a bit, place those in, and then actually have the trim go over top of that with the siding already put on, and that way I actually have to caulk behind it. And by caulking behind it, the hope is that actually protects the caulk itself from the sun and from the rain and from all the elements. So I'm kind of wanting to try that out. Now, I don't really know how it's going to look. There probably is a reason as to why the majority of the industry actually does the trim and siding the way that they do. But I'm kind of interested in building science and seeing ways of how to engineer something better. And what's a better test bed than just an equipment barn? So the other thing that I actually want to deal with is one of the frustrations that I have with windows in buildings is that a lot of times, because of the way that the trim and the siding kind of run up, especially on brick buildings, it's often really difficult to have, if you ever have a window leak, it's really difficult to actually replace that window and actually maintain the integrity of your weather barrier. And so what I'm wanting to do is I want to actually bring those windows out a bit, and I'm hoping then by, if ever, granted this is just a trial, and so it's really not such an issue with a house with siding, but we do actually want to use stone and brick in the houses that we're going to build in the future. But I want to bring that out a little bit and actually see if I can avoid, should I ever have to replace a window, I want to see if I can avoid actually damaging or compromising the integrity of the weather barrier behind the brick, or behind the stone, or even behind the siding. And so what my hope is that by bringing that out, I can just cover it up over with the trim once it's actually installed, and then by doing that, if I ever have to replace the window, I can just pop the trim off all the way around all four sides, and then screw the window mounting points out, and then just pull the window out and then replace it completely. Go back over it with my either a liquid flashing material or something like the zip tape, and then that way I have not compromised the weather barrier that's actually behind the brick. Because realistically, anytime if you've ever had any windows replaced, the majority of the practice is not actually to pull the entire window out, but they actually take the glazing out of the inside of the old framing of the window itself and then just put a new window inside of that framing, and then they'll put like a metal flashing or trim over top of that to then make it kind of look like it's continuous. And over time, you just reduce your windows down smaller and smaller the more you do that. And I don't know, I kind of like the idea of just being able to replace the window all the way to the studs. And so I want to see if I can work on doing something like that, and see if that might actually be a viable option for when we build our house. So that's the idea. So let's get that done. yesterday I was able to get all of the external framing for these windows completely finished, and that's fantastic. So today what I want to work on while I have time is trying to get in these window sills. And the idea behind these is that I want to create a plane in which, should the window ever fail, allows the water to come down, and instead of just sitting right here on this sill, it can actually drain out to the outside of the building. Now, I kind of discussed yesterday about the idea of trying to engineer everything in a way that I just assume that everything's going to fail, and so therefore I have backup on backup on backup that's going to help me out with that. And as much as I've tried my best with the exterior sheathing and really good overhangs, my assumption is that eventually the water will hit the windows if those things fail, and if they hit the windows, hopefully those will also shed water, but in the event that those fail, I want to have a backup option there too. So how this sill will work is that really I've just ripped this down on the table saw, 2x4, made an angle here, and that's going to sit into the window there, and that way if any water comes down, hits this edge, instead of sitting here and rotting out this wood, it will just shed away. On top of that, to actually make that waterproof, I've got this stretchy zip tape. This stuff's kind of cool. It's really stretchy, and it sticks really well. My only concern is that over time, I'm really wondering how long tape can actually last. And again, this building is kind of working as an experiment, one that I want to build well, because I don't want to have to do it again, but it is a bit of an experiment, because if this stretch tape, being that it's so much easier to install, goes on well and lasts for a really long time, then hey, that's fantastic. That's time that's going to actually, that I'll be saved. But in the event that it fails, it's not something catastrophic on a house that I'm actually living in. So now there are other things. There's some liquid applied type stuff that looks really good. And there's also these, which I think is the best case scenario, there are these aluminum pans that are actually welded in the corners to actually help shed that water away. And I think those would probably work the best, but they're expensive and hard to get a hold of right off the bat. So I want to try this out and see how it works. So I'm going to see if I can get that installed. Sweat. Yeah, babe, my whole life is one big butthole clench. Everything I do.
I don't like watching you up there.
Huh?
I don't like watching you up there. Thinking about you falling off that ladder, good grief.
I mean, babe, it's only 20 feet on the stone, you know? It's fine.
On the slope.
Yeah. As you can see, we have gotten all the furrow strips put up on the building now. We also got our first course of siding actually put up, and we have also actually put the R-guard just underneath the wall here to actually prevent any kind of moisture intrusion or bug intrusion underneath the wall itself, even though we also have this screen in, which is also a bit of a termite barrier. So we are actually ready to start working on getting the rest of our siding put up, so that's pretty exciting. So we got the first course of this siding up, and what we did was we ran a chalk line just to make sure that everything was perfectly straight and level exactly the way we wanted it with this first run of the actual siding itself. Now, one of the issues that I deal with sometimes, because we all have full-time jobs, is that someone's not always available to help me out whenever I need help. And so one of the big things that I wanted to do is actually get that first run up so that I could actually hopefully work on my own. And the only way that I was able to do that is I was looking online and I found this product, gecko gauges, I guess is what it is. And the nice thing about these is that they actually stick to the wall. I've already got the overlap and everything set that I want on the next course of siding. And the idea is that this will actually be like an extra set of hands when no one else is available. But the other nice thing too is that typically whenever we're setting siding, or according to how I've seen everybody do it, is they actually have to run a pencil line on every single board as they work up the wall to try to set the overlap the exact same. Well, the nice thing about this is that, you know, this gauge has already got the overlap actually set on it. So as soon as I stick this thing to the wall, it just kind of sets the overlap for me. So I just take that board, set it right on top of there, and then I just run right up the wall as I start nailing. And so hopefully that will make everything go much, much quicker today. Sometimes you just get that one tool, that one tool that just fits this like so specific niche in the market, and it makes all the difference. So that we are not sponsored by anyone at this point whatsoever. As a matter of fact, all the videos so far have been brought to you exclusively by my wallet. But with that, anytime that I ever find a solution to an issue that I've been dealing with, especially since we're doing all of this on our own and kind of experimenting and learning as we go, whenever I find issues with stuff that I can find a solution to, I feel like I have to tell everybody about it. And the reason why is because it takes me so long to find the solutions to these issues that even the manufacturer of the siding doesn't point any of this stuff out. But whenever it comes to cutting this fiber cement type siding, most of the stuff that's on any of the sites is all referencing like different bits and stuff for saws or grinders or anything like that. And the issue with this stuff is that when you cut it, it produces so much dust, and it's all silica dust, which means when it goes in your lungs, it never comes out again, and it'll probably give you cancer. So really try not to breathe that crap in. But what I found was actually these shears that are specifically made for like fiber cement type board. These are not metal shears. They are a product specifically of their own. But man, do these things make cutting this stuff so much more convenient. So I've got a decent edge right there, and it made no dust whatsoever, so I don't have to wear a mask, and I don't have to deal with all of that crap. So I would recommend, if you've got to do this stuff yourself, get a pair of these shears. Don't deal with the blades and all that garbage. It's just going to screw up your circular saw anyway. Now the way that this siding works, any kind of overlap siding, is that water is going to hit the side of this wall and it's going to run down, and then hopefully, because you have your
siding actually overlap just in the way that shingles work, is that they run down and then they'll hit the next piece of siding and then continue on down the wall. Now that's the idea. However, you have an issue here with whenever you have one solid piece of siding and then just below that you have a crack where two pieces were actually joined together. Now the problem is that whenever that rain hits, it's going to hit this part of the board, it's going to run down, and then once it hits this crack, it's going to work into that crack and then go straight through into the sheathing on your wall, and you really don't want it to be wet back here. But one of the best things that you could do is actually try to come up with a solution where you're actually going to kick that water back out again and then have it continue down the wall. And how we're going to accomplish that is we just take a piece of aluminum that we've cut here, we're going to slide that just behind this piece of sheathing. And then the idea is that whenever that water gets through this crack, it's going to hit that piece of aluminum, run down the aluminum, and be kicked back out on top of the next piece of siding. Now, you can do this by buying custom bent pieces of aluminum or stainless that you can actually slide behind here and then nail that to the wall. But the problem is that you're going to spend so much money actually having custom bent pieces. Now, what you can do is you can just go to any kind of box store. You can buy a roll of aluminum, which the stuff that we got came in a 50-foot long sheet, and it was like 10 inches wide. And so we just cut that in half, so we have 5-inch wide pieces, and we just cut that to size, and we use that. And that is going to save you pennies on the dollar as to what it would be if you bought custom bent little pieces to put there behind the wall. So that's our solution. So another thing that we kind of mentioned doing was actually trying to furrow out both our doors and our windows for the purpose of trying something a little bit different as far as our siding goes. Now, this is kind of how that was going to work, or what I was kind of referencing there. So the idea was that we brought this board out here, and then what we did was we actually are going to nail to this little portion that has this groove here. Now the idea is that once we get all the siding up, instead of actually having our siding butt up against our trim and then having to caulk a line down that, what we're going to do is we'll actually just come back through here with our siding and then nail that to this portion of the wall, and that's actually going to cover up this little overlap right here where the siding actually comes to its end. And the idea is that we can caulk actually behind that trim, and then that way we don't have sun exposure directly to the caulking. And so that's kind of our little experiment. So I guess we'll see how it looks. So now that I've got this much siding put up, I'm going to start thinking about the door trim. And one of the issues that I kind of had in my mind, or envisioned having in my mind, was that how do I find a solution for the water coming down the siding that's above the door and not going in behind the trim that is actually sitting on top of the siding itself? And the solution that I thought of is actually putting a piece of aluminum inside of the siding and then having it kick out over top of the trim. And that way I'll just have that aluminum kick that water out and then kind of angle it down a little bit so it just drips down in front of the door, and that way it just bypasses the siding completely. So let me show you how I work that out. So what I've done here is I've taken my trim and I've just put a little cut in it right here, and this cut is essentially going to go around the framing of the door itself. Now the trim of the door is going to hang proud of that framing of the door, and it's going to hang proud just right over here, and that's the reason why I put these cuts here, kind of hanging proud of the door itself. And so then what I've done is I've taken this piece of aluminum. Again, this is the same aluminum that I bought at a box store, and I put a little bend in it right here with some benders. And what that's going to do is that's going to fit down behind the siding itself. So that way, now my trim is going to fit underneath this portion, and then I have this little piece of aluminum now that's hanging out, and when that water runs down, it'll just kick straight out, and I don't have to worry about it going in behind the trim. So that was my idea. so far what I've gotten done is I've gotten everything that I can reach in terms of the siding. So everything that I do after this has to be done with the ladder, which is going to be tedious and miserable. But with that being said, I think this video has gone on long enough, so I think I'm gonna actually stop it here. Hopefully within the next video, we can actually get this thing completely finished. We can move on to another project, which is something we desperately need to do. And I'm hoping that project is actually gonna be re-engineering our entire water system for the house. So that'll be an interesting one that I think you all will wanna see. So with that being said, please subscribe, that'll help us out a whole lot. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Holy crap.